Your hands are black with tar-black resin. The smell of embalming pitch is already soaked into your hair, and the skull just rolled loose into your lap in front of 40 champagne-drunk guests. Nobody screams. Nobody even stops talking. A woman near the fireplace laughs and asks if you'll fetch another candle, because the shadows are more dramatic that way. You are the only person in the room who understands that what just landed in your lap used to be somebody's face. To the guests, it is a novelty. To the master, it is a display. There is no science in this room tonight, no careful study, no learned gentleman taking notes. There is a body on the table and a servant whose hands are already black from the handling of it. You are around 11 or 12 years old, taken into domestic service in a wealthy London household that has caught the fever of the century, Egyptomania. Thousands of servants like you were absorbed into these houses through the 1800s, houses where owning a piece of ancient Egypt had become the final mark of taste. Mummies were being imported so cheaply, and in such volume, that collectors stopped treating them as human remains at all. They were cargo, crates off a ship, same as furniture or spice. Your hands are already cracked and stained black, because the bitumen-based resin coating a real mummy is thick, sticky, and centuries old, and you touch it bare-skinned. No gloves, no protection, because nobody has told you it might matter. Tonight your master is hosting a party, and for the first time, we're not just hauling the crate up from the cellar or dusting the sarcophagus lid. You are the one he has to unwrap it, layer by layer, in front of his guests. He will stand beside you, talking about ancient piety and preservation technique. You will be the one peeling linen off a dead face while a room full of people watches. The sarcophagus lid is propped against the wall behind him. The linen beneath your fingers is stiff, brittle, and darker than the tablecloth. Each time you pull, a fine powder rises into the candlelight and stays there, hanging. The guests drink, you do not. By the middle of the 1800s, so many mummies had been shipped into Europe that the market flooded. Prices dropped. What had once been a rare curiosity for scholars became a novelty item any collector with enough money could own. And once something is easy to own, it stops being precious and starts being disposable. Wealthy men bought mummies the way they bought clocks or paintings, for status, for shock value, for something to talk about at dinner. Behind you, a log shifts in the fireplace, and the flame jumps yellow for a moment. The shadow of the body on the table twitches on the wallpaper, and no one notices. And here's the part no friend of the house is ever told. The physical labor of stripping centuries-old linen off a preserved human body was rarely done by the scholars who got the credit for it. It was delegated, handed off to hired staff, to apprentices, to whoever in the household was low enough in rank to be handed a corpse and a candle. The host stood back. He narrated. He gestured. He accepted the gasps. You did the unwrapping. Mummy unwrapping parties were a genuine, documented Victorian fashion. The most documented of them belonged to Thomas Pettigrew, a London surgeon who became so associated with these evenings that his own century called him Mummy Pettigrew. In 1834, he published the era's most complete history of Egyptian mummies, and then he began performing unrollings in front of guests. His audiences crowded in close as the linen came away, and pieces of the bandages were carried out of the room and kept as souvenirs. What a learned commentary was to them, a chore was to you. You are the one holding the linen. You are the one breathing in centuries of dust, kicked loose, with every layer. And when the wrapping finally falls away, it isn't you who gasps. Isn't you who leans forward. Isn't you who gets to feel the wonder of it. The guests get the reaction. You get the mess. The bandage scraps go into the fire when the evening is over, or they go into a guest's pocket. You are the one who gathers the pieces that fall on the floor before the dog gets to them, before the hem of a silk dress drags them through the room. But nobody in that drawing room, half drunk and thrilled, is thinking for 1 second about what it means to breathe centuries-old preservation chemicals into your lungs. Night after night, party after party, the resins used in ancient Egyptian embalming were often bitumen and tar-based substances, thick, dark, and when broken apart or unwound after thousands of years, capable of releasing fine dust and fumes into the air of a closed, candlelit room. There was no medical framework yet for understanding what handling centuries-old decomposed human remains might do to a living body. No mask, no ventilation, no warning, just bare hands, close air, and a room full of guests drinking while you work. And outside the parties, the same invisibility that makes you useful in the drawing room follows you everywhere else. You are staff, not a scholar, not a gentleman, not anyone whose observations get written into a journal. So when your hands crack further, when your breathing changes, when the smell that is soaked into your hair never quite washes out no matter how many times you scrub, none of it gets recorded. No one asks how you are feeling. No one writes down your name. At night, you scrub the black from your fingers with salt and cold water until they bleed. The stains stay under the nails. By morning, the tar is back. And just as you start to become the household's go-to hand for this work, the one they call for whenever a new crate arrives from the docks, the whole trade underneath you starts to quietly fall apart. You are around 20 now, and here's the turn nobody saw coming when this all started. The public fascination with mummy unwrapping had been running on novelty, and novelty has a shelf life. As the European market kept flooding with cheap, easily obtained mummies, the mystique that made the first unwrappings feel daring simply curdled. What had been scientific curiosity, in the early decades of the century, slid into gimmick, and gimmick eventually slid into embarrassment. Historians studying the period note that the trend did not end with some dramatic scandal. It just waned, the way fashions do, as spectacle wore thin, and hosts moved on to whatever came next. The drawing rooms stopped calling, the crates stopped arriving. You were not dismissed by anyone, you simply became unnecessary. One season your hands were worth something, the next, the same hands were only another mouth to feed. And here is the documented fate that the parties never advertised. Those mummies did not go back to their graves. The ones that did not end up on someone's mantelpiece ended up on a pigment grinder. Victorian colormen sold a standard artist's brown called mummy brown, made from ground human mummies. One London firm, C. Robertson & Co., kept a genuine mummy on its premises so that orders for that pigment could be filled on demand. As late as 1964, the firm said it had to stop making the color because it had finally run out of actual mummies. And in the same traffic, in 1888, about 180,000 mummified cats were shipped from Egypt to Liverpool in a single documented cargo to be ground into fertilizer. The dead had become a trade good, and the trade did not stop when the parties ended. When the parties stop being fashionable, so does the need for you. There is no pension for a mummy unwrapper, no professional reference for the next job that says handled ancient human remains competently for a decade. Just a very specific, very useless skill. And a body that has spent years absorbing dust for resins nobody understood. You go looking for other work in a London that has already forgotten what you used to be hired for. Some unwrapping events, to be fair to the historical record, genuinely did aim at study. Public lectures where a scholar walked an audience through embalming ritual, anatomy, the burial customs of a civilization most people in that room knew almost nothing about. That side of it existed. But museum historians still openly debate whether 19th century mummy unrolling was ever really science at all, or whether it was spectacle borrowing science's language to make itself feel respectable. That debate matters for the mummies. It never mattered for you. By the time institutions began treating Egyptian remains with anything resembling ethical seriousness, decades later, and slowly even then, the unnamed servants and assistants who had done the actual physical unwrapping for years had already vanished from the record completely. The bodies got catalogued. You didn't. Because that's what this was always really about. The mummy unwrapping craze was not really about ancient Egypt at all. It was about Victorian appetite, for spectacle, for status, for something to gasp at over champagne, dressed up in the language of curiosity and science, and running the entire time on the invisible labor of people history never bothered to name. The guests got the wonder, The master got the reputation, the body got the preservation, you got the dust, the stains, and no name at all. This wasn't fiction, this was somebody's whole life.